Hello, everyone, and welcome to an exciting edition of Training Unleashed. We're going to be talking today about one of my favorite topics, which I think is more important to talk about today than ever, which is DE&I training and the importance of inclusiveness in the workplace. Before we get going, on behalf of the Learning Network, I want to welcome everyone to the show, and I want to thank my sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. My guest today is Chloé Valdary, and she is the founder of a company called Theory of Enhancement. Enchantment, not enhancement. Chloé, I'm very dyslexic, so I want to apologize.
That's okay.
But it's interestingly, my first question is, what does enchantment mean? It doesn't sound businesslike, but I am sure it's important. So tell us why you chose that name for your company.
Well, first of all, thank you, Evan, for having me on the show today. And yes, the theory of enchantment. What does enchantment mean? I like to define enchantment as a process by which you delight someone with a product, another idea, or a person. And more perhaps in depth, enchantment is about opening up to yourself and to your own complexity and to the fullness of what it means to be human. And by doing so, you will be able to open up to see that within others and to do so compassionately and in awe. And the reason why I call my company the Theory of Enchantment is because when I was trying to figure out how to build a company that would do diversity and inclusion work in a way that's rooted in love and compassion, I actually studied pop culture and I studied brands in pop culture that people are in love with. People are already in love with brands like Disney and Apple and Nike. And they already had this element of enchantment. I mean, especially Disney. Enchantment is sort of a central piece in Disney canon. And so that sparkle, that sense of delight, that sense of flow state that you get when you are in right relationship with yourself and the world around you, that is the essence of the feeling I'm trying to capture in that word.
Well, I think it's actually a very powerful word because it really talks about the essence of what your company's doing. And I'm just in the middle of reading a book, actually, in the middle of reading it a second time called Make It Stick. And it's a very memorable name, right?
Yeah.
It's not the same as everyone else. So,
Yeah.
Chloé, I want to bring up a controversial topic.
Okay.
And I want to bring it up because I think, there was a time when people were really getting the importance of DE&I, the importance of inclusion, the importance of workplace safety.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, we have this movement, I'll call it the anti-woke movement.
Mm-hmm.
And personally, I think it just makes the importance of DEI training all that much more important.
Mm-hmm.
But, what are you hearing, and are companies adjusting because of this fairly large anti-woke movement?
So I would just like to say that my company anticipated this back in 2020, after the murder of George Floyd and the ground swelling interest in DE&I training. Obviously, we saw a lot of consulting work and training in the workplace, but a lot of it wasn't exactly healthy, let's say. Some of it was healthy, but some of it was presented in a way that was, quite frankly, dehumanizing to people. And it wasn't rooted in what Dr. King called agape love or unconditional love. And so we anticipated that backlash as a result of that central feature not being present in a lot of DE&I training. So in terms of what we are seeing some companies, quite frankly, simply slash their budgets, their DEI training budgets completely. We're also seeing other companies focus more on the B acronym for belonging, and asking themselves, how can we focus on belonging? How can we create a space that's both inclusive and uh, creates a sense of belonging so that anyone who comes in, no matter what skin color, no matter what gender, etc., will feel like they are welcome. I think that that is in many ways a healthy pivot, um, away from some of the more, let's say, quota-based approaches to DE&I, which have not worked these past 4 years. and in some cases have created backlashes because it's caused litigation issues. It's caused people to feel as if they are being condescended towards because of their skin color, speaking about both Black and white people in this case. White people being perceived as the quote unquote oppressor inherently because of their skin color, Black people being perceived as quote unquote the oppressed inherently because of their skin color. This designation has not helped people in the long run. And so there is unfortunately an excess to the backlash that we're seeing. I'm sure you've heard of universities completely getting rid of their DEI programs in places
Oh
like
yeah.
Texas and Utah, so on and so forth. This is not something that I would recommend doing. But simultaneously, we've seen other people come up with better ways to do DEI, and I think that that's the way to go.
So what's interesting, and from my point of view, is I've always looked at D&I as a very good thing for a business.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about being woke or not
Mm-hmm.
woke. It's about businesses are better when they are diverse in nature because they become diverse in ideas. They
Absolutely.
become welcoming and recruit talent because people want to work in a welcoming and amazing environment.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of love, I'm using this word, which maybe is a mistake because I'm about to go into, I love the fact you bring love into the concept.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but maybe talk a little bit more about that because it's very clear from what I know of you that it's not just the facts, so to speak,
No.
it's how.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that so important?
Well, it's important because we want to get people away from a mindset where they see someone who looks differently from them and feel threatened to a mindset where they see someone who looks different from them and they get curious, right? And they feel a sense of positive well-being and curiosity, let's say. But to get someone to move from A to B requires practice. It does not and is not accomplished by simply memorizing a bunch of conceptual propositional facts about the history of racism, let's say, in the United States of America, or how that has impacted people of color and other ethnic minorities. That is necessary but insufficient. In order to create behavior change, we have to practice. And the second thing I would say in response to that is, what are we actually trying to practice when I say we have to practice? What happens when we perceive difference as a source of threat? Well, what's happening is we are experiencing, for whatever reason, some sort of psychological insecurity, let's say, and we don't know how to deal with that insecurity. And so, what we have done as human beings for a while now is we have said to ourselves, okay, there's a lot of chaos and insecurity in my experience. I don't know how to deal with it. So, I'm going to reach for an easy heuristic that simply says that all the people who look like me are good and all the people who don't look like me are bad. Or all the people who think like me are good and all the people who don't think like me are bad, right? You could insert whatever into that heuristic. And I'm going to take that and use it as a defensive mechanism in order to make myself feel secure. Again, this is a very basic human thing that all human beings do. That is a practice, that is a habit. We're not aware or unconscious of the fact that it is a habit, a mindset. But in order to shift, we have to actually engage in regular introspection. We call these in the theory of enchantment quests or questions, right? So that we can actually train our brains to enter into that curious, compassionate mindset directed at both ourselves and the other. And that first part is really important because the things that we're often insecure about are often things that we don't like about ourselves. So let me give you an example. There's a practice in the theory of enchantment called the who am I practice. And in the who am I practice, you ask yourself, who am I? And for everything that comes up, you say thank you. And you do this for like 3 minutes. And the hard part about this is to answer honestly and include those things that you don't like about yourself in that
Mm,
question and say thank you. And the reason why we do that is because if I know, for example, that I am hardworking in some contexts and can accept that, and I'm lazy in other contexts and can accept that, I will be less likely to project the stereotype of laziness onto another group of people in order to feel good about myself, right? Because I can accept the totality of my being, I can accept the totality of all beings, but that takes practice.
I love that very much. Hey, everyone, I want to take a moment and talk to you about the Learning Network. As you know, the Learning Network is a sponsor of this show, and I just want to tell you what a special company it is. Back in 2003, 6 learning companies were brought together and merged into one, a powerhouse, a company that literally, if it's in training, the Learning Network can handle it. I am so proud to be affiliated with the Learning Network and its team of learning professionals. Contact us today by going to learning.net and learn more about the Learning Network and how we can help your company go to the next level. You're saying something to me that sounds like curiosity to some degree.
Yes.
And I think that's very powerful. I
Mm-hmm.
want to take what you're saying into the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of companies have e-learning courses.
Sure.
Our company, the Learning Network, has a great e-learning course on diversity, equity, inclusion. But I think we all know that having everyone take an e-learning course is not bad, but it's just
Yeah.
a start. It's just a part of it. And I know your company works with companies and helps create a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe because this is not here to be an ad for your company, but
Right.
share advice to our listeners of how they can incorporate and make DE&I and inclusion
Mm-hmm.
part of the culture of the company as opposed to something they do every year.
So there are 3 principles to the theory of enchantment. The first principle, treat people like human beings, not political abstractions. The second principle, criticize to uplift and empower, never to tear down or destroy. And the third principle is try to root everything you do in love and compassion. If you want to use those 3 principles to build a culture, like let's say in a team that actually embodies those 3 principles, you have to do so in a way where the team is practicing every day, basically. So when the team encounters conflict, let's say with their colleagues, when the team encounters conflict with customers, when the team encounters conflicts with higher up, how can they be showing up in such a way where they're embodying those 3 principles? I would say that is the first question that leadership should have in the forefront of their brain when they're thinking about how to design the culture. And then it's just reverse engineering and working backwards. And obviously, different things will work for different companies depending on the type of ecosystem that that company exists in, right? So if you have a company where there's frontline workers and those frontline workers are working on shift and they want to practice, that's going to look very different from a company where it's managers and it's salaried managers and they want to practice, right? So um, these will look differently according to the ecosystem, but that is the general idea. How can we show up every day where we are embodying these 3 principles? And that will create that inclusive culture of belonging where anyone, regardless of their background, will feel like they are welcome and will feel like they are safe to make mistakes. I think like being safe to make mistakes is important in fostering that culture of curiosity that you talked about.
So what I'm hearing, and I like, is that you embrace these 3 principles,
Mm-hmm.
and it really starts with leadership living those principles, which
Mm-hmm.
will then inspire the rest of the company to live in those principles.
Mm-hmm.
And now you brought on this idea that it's okay for people to make mistakes, which I think is really powerful because I think a lot of times people are just like afraid of, I just don't want to discuss anything because I don't
Right.
want to take a chance.
Right.
How do you create a culture that embraces mistakes, and what are the red lines where a mistake is really more than a mistake, but
Mm.
an aggression?
Meaning everyone understands that these are the rules of engagement. So, if I'm a manager and I come to you and I ask you to do something, I just know that I'm going to hold you accountable, right? I'm going to have a tracking mechanism in place where I'm seeing if you're on task with this project, or you're seeing and you're reporting back to me accordingly. We need to be on the same page that that is actually the process that we both commit to engaging in from the get-go. And so you know that if you don't show up engaging in that process, there's going to be a checks and balances in place where I'm going to call you out, or call you in rather, right? I'm going to hold you accountable. And obviously, if the pattern continues, then you might not be a good fit for the company, and we're going to have to let you go. I think that having a mindset, first of all, whether it's hiring, orientation, or onboarding, let's say, nurturing, and then offboarding, or as I like to call it, a theory of enchantment, commencement, right? Where let's say that you as a leader recognize that someone on your team is not a good fit for the team and needs to be let go. How can you have that mindset of, oh well, this person needs to find a place that is aligned with them, and we're going to help them in that process. So firing is not perceived as something, or as merely something that's quite frankly heartbreaking or difficult to do. It's also perceived as actually equipping and empowering someone to find the best fit for them. So I would, in terms of like the difficulties of when something is really a red line, and people aren't actually, let's say, showing up in a way that is aligned with the company's values, there needs to be a process in place at the beginning so that everyone understands that this is what we are all committing to as a team, and everyone understands the consequences of saying you're going to commit to something and actually not doing it. So everyone needs to be on the same page as that, or on that at the beginning, and obviously leadership needs to lead that and create that. And I've seen situations in which leadership has failed to do that, and that has caused all kinds of problems in the long run, where leadership has not been actually creating an ecosystem where everyone understands that they are a team first and foremost, right? So that's a huge issue. And then secondly, there's misalignment all throughout different departments of the organization because they don't recognize that they're working as a team. And then when you try to introduce later, okay, this is how we're going to actually start doing things in this team-like way, it becomes that much harder. So you just have to get ahead of that as soon as possible and as quickly as possible as the leadership team, and then embody that in every meeting, in the way you show up to work, in the way that you talk to your managers, and the way you talk to your frontline staff if you have a company that has frontline staff and or managers. But the team really needs to set the tone and needs to understand that they're responsible for setting that tone.
I love what you're saying, and I'm going to take what you just did and consolidate it to two words:
Sure.
clarity and consistency,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I have found in my work experience that people put a third element in that is completely inappropriate, which is
Okay.
performance,
Okay. Okay.
because they
Yeah.
will judge people that are high performers far more forgivingly than
Mm.
poor performers.
Mm-hmm.
And then that creates that culture where there is not consistency, and people notice that people are being
Mm-hmm.
treated differently in terms of how they treat other people in the company because they can get away with something if they're a high performer.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more question because I
Sure.
think this question is important, because as I listen to you, I'm sitting here thinking the best thing to do is to hire people that their core being supports the culture of the company,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to
Yeah.
hiring somebody who just simply isn't a good cultural fit. Can you
Mm.
share one or two interview questions that you like that help you
Hmm.
understand someone's core vision, core
This is
person,
a
I guess?
Yeah, this is a good question. One of the questions I would ask is what attracts you to this company in the first place? Well, I guess another way to put that is why do you want to work here?
Yeah.
Like like why do you want to be here? And a follow-up question would be I would actually, so this is company specific, so the details would have to be flushed out,
Yeah.
but I would actually give them give the prospective employee a problem solving exercise, right? Like this company is dealing with problem X, and it needs to be in a different place, at a certain time frame. What are the 3 prototype solutions that you would come up with to get us from place A to place B and why? Now, obviously, I would give them some time to answer that question. It
Yeah.
wouldn't be, but I would want to see how they think about problem solving, because that would reveal what level of curiosity they are at, or lack thereof, among other things.
Interesting question. I really like that. I always like to ask questions where you give somebody an opportunity to analyze and diagnose a
Yeah.
problem and what you would do.
Mm-hmm.
I think we could talk for a lot longer. Unfortunately, we have time limits, but the
Sure.
audience, I'm sure by now, like me, is very impressed because
Thank you.
you're really holistically looking at DE&I and you're not just checking a box, which I think is
Yes.
important. Chloé, can you share now, please let everyone know what your company does and who you like to work for and the services you offer?
Yes, so we do D&I training via workshops and also coaching and also digital platform-based training. We work with, typically speaking, small to medium-sized enterprises. Our workshops range from 90-minute virtual talks to full day in-person talks. We call our 90-minute workshops sprints and our full day in-person workshops marathons. We
I
also,
like that.
oh,
That's
yeah.
great,
So just so you
great
know, like, to
branding.
get into the mindset, right? We have a practice-based digital program called the Enchanted Games League, which I'm actually really excited about. It is that practice orientation that I talked about earlier. Teams enter into a platform for as long as 9 weeks, and every single day in those 9 weeks, they get a quest or question that takes no longer than 6 minutes to answer. And these questions are questions like, write about a time where you felt expansive and a time you felt defensive. What were the differences between those two feelings? Write about a mindset that you got from your caretakers that you'd like to keep and that you'd like to get rid of. Write about a time you felt superior to another human being. What did that feel like? What was the situation? Right. And what ends up happening is that if you actually go on and engage a quest, you will become more comfortable living in the question. And you'll be more curious as a result of that. And what will happen is when you encounter conflict between yourself, let's say, and another colleague, you will get more curious about figuring out where they're coming from, and you will be able to show up in a way that's less defensive, which will then lower their defenses, which will get you closer to being able to problem solve for a solution in the first place. So those are some of our offerings. Those are most of our offerings.
Can I just say something
Yeah,
while
absolutely.
it's still relevant?
Yeah.
Your question, tell us about a time that you felt superior and how did you handle it,
Hmm.
would be an amazing interview question.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So
Good to
I
know.
just sat there as I'm listening, going, "Oh, wow, that would be a great interview
Good
question."
to know. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great
but
feedback.
please continue on and make sure you give everyone the URL and how to contact you and things like that.
Yes, so our URL is theoryofenchantment.com. You can also contact us by going to info@theoryofenchantment.com. My admin team will connect directly with you if you use that email to inquire. Again, you can also go on our website, theoryofenchantment.com, and to read all of our philosophy and all that we're about.
Excellent. Theoryofenchantment.com. Chloé, as you know, we always end our episodes with if you have one tip to share with the audience, what would that one tip be?
The one tip that I would share with the audience is to learn how to accept yourself. And this alludes to something that I mentioned earlier with the Who Am I practice. We are so hard on ourselves, often looking down on ourselves, often condescending to ourselves. We've often internalized negative self-judgment, negative self-thoughts. and we walk around with that, and then we unconsciously project it onto the other, whoever the other is, whether they look differently from us or not. And the seed of being able to stop that process is to actually start to look towards ourselves with compassion and curiosity and love. So if people could really take that in and internalize that, that would be the tip that I would give people to take away from this conversation.
It's a really powerful tip.
Thank you.
And I totally agree with you. People are very hard on themselves,
Absolutely.
very hard. And I think as long as you're trying to constantly, I believe in being a lifelong learner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of forgiveness to give yourself as long as you recognize and take action to improve. So
Absolutely.
on behalf of the Learning Network, Chloe, I want to thank you for being a guest. I want to thank the listeners for listening. Without you, I wouldn't have a show. Thank my sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. And also remind people you can go to YouTube and search for Training Unleashed Network and subscribe and see this podcast as well as see others. Everyone have a great day.